Good morning, everyone. My name is Celeste Schubert. I'm VP of Programs at New York City SHRM, and I want to welcome all of you today to our webinar. It's regarding the Victim Compensation Fund. Governor Kathy Hochul recently signed into law the 9/11 Notice Act. The legislation, which passed unanimously by the state Senate and Assembly, requires businesses and institutions that had people return after the attack to notify them of potential eligibility for the Victim Compensation Fund and World Trade Center Health Fund. And without further ado, I'd like to proudly present our speakers, starting with Michael Barasch, who's the managing partner at Barasch and McGarry.
Celeste, thank you, and we really appreciate your kind invitation. So with me today are my partners, Lee London and Dana Cohen, and Liam Lynch from NICOSH has been kind enough to join us as well. And Liam's going to tell us all about one of the two programs created by Congress for the 9/11 community. And as I mentioned earlier, and you're going to hear this over and over again, there was a good reason why the governor just signed this bill called the 9/11 Notice Act. It was passed unanimously by both the New York State Assembly and Senate. And I'm going to summarize it right now, but basically it will require every employer to notify the employees who work for that company 22 years ago, anytime between 9/11 and May 30th of 2002. And they're entitled to incredible benefits if only they knew that they were available. And that's why the governor just signed this bill, which mandates that every employer tell their former employees about these two programs. So before we get any further, I want to set the stage with a short video because you can see the real hero was Jon Stewart.
The first thing that I hear from the non-first responder community in Lower Manhattan is, I'm sick, but I don't deserve anything. I'm not a first responder. I just lived here. I just studied here. I just went to school here. I just raised a family here. Your presence here was an act of courage and resilience. The first responders, I'm in awe. But I also am in great awe of those who came back to a war-torn neighborhood that was clearly toxic. We knew it, but you stayed anyway, and you allowed this area to grow. But it's your courage and your resilience that brought this place back. So please, I urge you, access what you are owed.
Over the last decade, we have all fought very hard so that everyone has access to the health care that they need. It is very important that every community member, anywhere south of Houston, understands that you are covered. You are part of the group of people that have guaranteed health care if you have a 9/11 related disease.
So we have taken on, with all of these advocates here, the task of trying to get everyone to understand that they have rights, and it is imperative that they sign up.
One of the really surprising things about our research is that an event in 2001 can continue to have echoes decades later, such that it is as though never smokers are smoking 2 packs a day.
People don't realize that they are eligible. And for many people, it's not a question of if they're going to get sick, it's a question of when.
How do I prove my illness was caused by the 9/11 toxins? You don't have to prove that, it's presumptive. You only have to prove that you lived or you worked in the downtown area.
Many of us returned before the fires were out, without proper equipment, without proper advice from professionals, and now a slew of health conditions, respiratory issues, and many cancers.
Basically, to be entitled to compensation, you need to prove that you were either caught in the dust cloud on 9/11 or that you were below Canal Street between 9/11 and May 30th of 2002. That's all it takes.
All right. Normally, when I'm speaking to a live crowd, I'll ask people to raise their hand. Who was downtown or working downtown 22 years ago? It doesn't matter whether any of us who are on this panel or watching today were there. What's important is that you help us spread the word about the rights that are now available. So the EPA infamously said 5 days after 9/11 the air is safe to breathe. It wasn't. We know from the autopsy of James Zadroga, who was one of my clients, he died of pulmonary fibrosis. There was benzene, chromium, lead in his lung tissue when they did his autopsy. So if he has it and he was exposed to it, so were so many others. And that's why NIOSH has now linked 69 cancers and many, many respiratory illnesses to the exposure. But to be eligible for the health program, which is one program that Congress created, Congress did the right thing when they passed the Zadroga Health and Compensation Act, creating the health program and the Victim Compensation Fund. That's great. Now we got to make sure people take advantage of it. We're very frustrated. While over 85% of firefighters and cops are enrolled in these two programs, the health program and the Victim Compensation Fund, less than 10% of the office workers, regular workers, students, teachers, less than 10% of the civilians are yet enrolled. So there was we lobbied the New York State Legislature, as I mentioned, they unanimously passed it. There's Sayegh and Senator Kavanagh. We couldn't have done it without them. They're the ones who introduced these bills and got the support. And but going on, the governor signed the bill, and it's all we're trying to do is get more awareness. That's the reason for this bill, to get more awareness of the eligibility of these two programs. So I'm going to start. One of the two programs is the health program. As you can see from this map, it's got slightly different eligibility requirements. It's a little bit bigger than the yellow area of the map, which is those people who are also eligible for the Victim Compensation Fund. We'll get more into that later, but Liam, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you first tell us who are you working with and why is this so important to you?
Thank you, Michael. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me. So my name is Liam Lynch. I'm a safety and health specialist with NICOSH, New York Committee for Occupational Safety and Health. We are a nonprofit organization in the city that works with New York City workers in order to protect them against job-related injuries and illnesses. And we are one of the proud organizations that serve the 9/11 community. So I'm here today to talk about one of two programs that have been set up by the Zadroga Act to serve 9/11 responders and survivors. So this first program is the World Trade Center Health Program that provides health screenings and medical treatment for those that were directly impacted, those survivors and responders. And so this is a program that covers 9/11 related conditions, and there, like Michael said, 69 cancers are covered, but there's a whole host of physical and mental health conditions, over 100, that are covered in the program. And so there are physicians, doctors, healthcare professionals that are specialized in treating these 9/11 related health conditions. The program provides medical tests, doctor visits, surgeries, prescription drugs, and benefit counseling. And like I said, it's not just for physical ailments, that is extremely important, but for mental health care as well. So we know that many of those that were down there are, suffering from PTSD, anxiety, panic disorder, and the program will cover those as well. And this coverage is no cost for the health, no cost, and also it's unique care. It's unique care. It's not, when responders or survivors are diagnosed with asthma related to their exposure of all of the many contaminants that we know that were down there. It's not just regular asthma, right? It's asthma related to their exposure. So the treatment may be unique, and that's the kind of unique, tailored healthcare that responders and survivors currently can receive. And so many do not know about this program, and so we're here to educate, spread the word. We'd love to have you on board. There's many barriers to access this care. A lot of the responders and survivors are now sick. They're overwhelmed, they're confused. And so we really need to continue to educate and provide outreach. And I'll leave with this note that, why 20 plus years later, right? It's because there's a long latency period between the time that you're exposed to all of those mini toxins, asbestos was one of them down there, and the time that you develop a condition. Mesothelioma, which is a lung disease related to asbestos exposure, can develop 20, 30, even 40 years after initial exposure. So this community is continuing to fall ill this many years later, and this is why this healthcare program is so important. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate your support. Be well, guys.
Liam, I want to thank you again. That was great of you to fit us in today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
All right, so let's go on to the Victim Compensation Fund. And Lee London, would you tell us some of the highlights of that?
Thanks, Michael. I'm Lee London. I'm the managing attorney of our 9/11 BCF practice here at Barasch McGarry, and I'm just excited to be on this right now because the 9/11 Notice Act does something. It does exactly what it says it does. It gives notice and it educates, survivors, or a lot of people call them the forgotten victims, because like Michael said, first responders, volunteers, they know about these free federal programs. The survivors, the workers that even went in on 9/11, or even if they weren't there on 9/11 and went into the zone 2 weeks later, like most, office employers, workers, anybody who went back into the zone, they don't know that they're entitled to these benefits as well. So this notice that you're giving to people that might have retired or moved away, how are they going to link and connect anything they're suffering from today to their exposure over 20 years ago? So it's so important for us to get the word out, but it's also so important because it saves lives, because these conditions, the 9/11 conditions, as Liam was talking about, takes years to develop. So when the Zadroga Act was created, it broke it down into two entities. You have the World Trade Center Health Program on one side, which is free medical benefits for a 9/11 related condition. And on the other side is the Victim Compensation Fund, which is a monetary award. So no amount of money will ever take place of what happened on 9/11. But if you were a worker, and I've been doing this for over 10 years now. So when I dealt with many survivors who worked in the zone, they didn't even think this program was real. They didn't even think that these benefits were real. But they went through this program, and after it, they would say, Lee, my friend, my coworker got bladder cancer in 2008 and is suffering so bad right now, and they don't even know about these programs. So then I help them. So it causes a wave. And since after doing this for 10 years, we realized how little information is out there for the survivor population. And one thing I wanted to mention is this is not a lawsuit. This is a federally run program. This is not a lawsuit. There is no fear of any lawsuit or anything like that against the employers or anything. This is just to give notice to your employees that worked there during that time and now can take advantage of these free federal benefits that can save lives and help support their families.
Lee, if I can, that might be a good opportunity for me to also say, not only is this not litigation, it's not adversarial. Both the health program and the Victim Compensation Fund will help you if you call them directly. You don't even need an attorney. Now, many people feel like it is worth paying the 10% fee that Congress has capped attorney fees at, because there is a lot of paperwork and you need to prove that you were in the exposure zone, which is, again, why we're talking about the 9/11 Notice Act, because that the purpose of the bill is to help people get that proof. And you as the employers have the best opportunity to help your former employees.
So the best part about the Victim Compensation Fund and the World Trade Center Health Program is that it has been extended to outlive anybody who might have exposure until 2090. So you never waive your future legal rights. Why, if you get diagnosed with asthma and you move forward on a claim to the Victim Compensation Fund and you have your condition linked with the World Trade Center Health Program, you can always amend your claim. God forbid you get diagnosed with something else down the line. You never waive your future legal right. And with the Victim Compensation Fund, that's why it's so important that people know about these benefits, because many people don't want to move forward even if they're healthy. And what we tell people is you must register, even if you're not sick right now, so you have everything in line, because once you get that oh my God moment, you want to have everything prepared. Proving your presence in the exposure zone gets harder and harder as time goes by. So they will accept employment confirmation letters. They will accept different payroll records if you have them. The Victim Compensation Fund created a document called a witness presence statement, and that's what we use for many survivors whose companies don't have the records but know that they were there and worked there during that time. The witness presence statement will take care of the presence, and it is filled out. We help you complete this, and there are many detailed requirements for it, but it allows us to use these witness presence statements instead of employment documents if they don't exist.
If you have a couple of colleagues, the more the better, frankly, because you can each sign for each other. In addition to a letter from the employer, if the employer is still in existence, having two witnesses who the Victim Compensation Fund can call, who the health program can verify and say, do you remember Joe Smith? Oh yeah, how do you remember that he was working downtown? Well, I worked next to him. And you don't have to prove you were there on 9/11.
So exactly. And many of the survivors that I speak to put me in touch with their HR representatives because that's where they want the records. They want these records so they can go through it, bring it up, and then say, oh, yes, he did work here during this time. So it spreads, and you just help so many different lives by doing this. Now, when I first started working here with the survivors, we would have companies like Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, Amex, and we would have to get in touch with them, explain to them about this process and benefits, and then they started producing employment verification letters. They started connecting directly with the Victim Compensation Fund. It's key, but we need to keep doing more because there were so many companies that were down there in the exposure zone that haven't sent out any notices to their retirees, to their active employees, and it's for anybody who was exposed and could be, because the lingering effects of 9/11 still hit today. Skin cancer is the #1 condition I get calls about from survivors in the zone, and they don't even know that this condition is covered, let alone that they qualify for these free programs. It is imperative that we make sure everybody knows. On the screen right now, you'll see the list of the most common cancers. Uterine cancer was just added this year, and the only reason why uterine cancer was added this year and not added years ago like all the other cancers was because the World Trade Center Health Program needed the records. They needed the evidence that uterine cancer was linked to 9/11, and they didn't have many females joining the World Trade Center Health Program to get those records and to see the patterns. And finally, with more survivors joining, more first responders joining the program, they were able to link it. The more people in the program, the more conditions that could be added because they have the research to support the connection. It's imperative that we reach out to anybody that could have this exposure because it saves lives. But going back to the Victim Compensation Fund, you can make a claim for your pain and suffering for non-cancer conditions and cancer conditions, ranging from 20 to 90,000, and for severe cancers, 200 to 340,000. But like I said before, you can always go back and amend your claim. God forbid you get diagnosed with something in the future. And the #1 aspect of the Victim Compensation Fund that I love is that not only can you make a non-economic loss claim, but many of my clients become permanently disabled due to their conditions. They go on short-term disability, long-term, and then Social Security because they get these severe cancers that are unexplained, that come out of nowhere and force them out of employment. Loss of earnings claims can make someone whole again, and many survivors don't even know that they're entitled to these benefits. Also, out-of-pocket medical expenses. If you're not part of the health program, save every receipt you have for any condition that you believe is 9/11, and we can make a claim directly to the Victim Compensation Fund to get that reimbursed to you. My partner, Dana Cohen, will talk more about the wrongful death aspect of the Victim Compensation Fund. But I'm just happy that we are getting the word out and we can just try to find as many people as possible that have this exposure.
Thank you, Michael and Lee. It's a sad fact that more people have died of 9/11 disease than died on 9/11. When we talk about survivors, What I want you to understand is some of the people we are categorizing as survivors have passed away. Thousands of them have. A survivor, in the terminology of the health program and the Victim Compensation Fund, is somebody who was exposed to 9/11 toxins, but was not a first responder or an emergency worker. So all of the people that you serve, you know, the office employees, they are survivors. And if they passed away, if they're not with us anymore, they are still categorized as survivors. And if they passed away from a 9/11 related illness, their families are entitled to benefits from the Victim Compensation Fund. And they suffer from the same problem that you've been hearing about and that triggered this 9/11 Notice Act to be created, and that is that they don't know it. They don't know that these benefits are available. They don't know that they're entitled to them. And you as human resources professionals, as these rules are developed regarding what employers will have to do, some of the notifications that you will be making will be to families, and they will be about this part of the program. So families are entitled to benefits if they can show that the person passed away from a 9/11 related illness. So one of the cancers or the respiratory conditions that we've talked about, virtually any cancer is covered. There isn't one I can think of that isn't. So any cancer and virtually every respiratory condition will be covered. The VCF will award, if there was no personal injury claim that was brought while the survivor was alive, the family can bring that part of the claim, and they will get those personal injury benefits in addition to the wrongful death benefits. The wrongful death benefits include a $250,000 award in additional pain and suffering, awards for the spouse, for each dependent of the victim, awards for lost household services, for funeral costs, and for economic losses that result from the person passing away. And of course, compensation for medical expenses where appropriate are also available. If the survivors themselves are not making the connection, and we know that they're not, it's even harder for the families to make the connection because they're one step further removed from what happened. And very, very important that we spread the word to them.
Right, that's a good point, Dana. That's why we even tell healthy people, you should secure your evidence now. And then, as I said, you don't need to hire a lawyer. Dana, one of the things we've been pretty successful at is when someone calls us from a company that's long been out of business, they remember, God, there was someone named Janet who worked next to me, but they don't remember the person's name. It's possible, we have a huge database, of course, of over 35,000 clients, but we've been successful with her permission, of course, telling the witness's name to our client to see if they remember each other. And more often than not, we have found witnesses for people. So I know people use LinkedIn and other social media. That's another way, Facebook. There's so many ways that you can do this and find those witnesses. Lee, talk a bit, will you please, about some of the other ways people can protect themselves now.
So the best part right now is to, if you have any evidence of your 9/11 exposure, pictures, statements, anything, I get documents all the time that were issued right after 9/11 of, welcome back to the office, and these are the precautions that we're going to be taking, and any documentation that proves you were there, you keep today, because many people don't want to move forward until they're sick, which is what we're trying to avoid. They don't even start asking questions. They're worried at the office. They don't want anyone knowing about their conditions or making a claim. I want to get over those obstacles because,
speaking of obstacles, Dana, what do you say to someone who says, "Oh, I was just an office worker. I'm not a firefighter or a police officer. I'm not a hero. I don't want to take money away from the firefighters."
Yeah, nobody is taking anything from anybody. When the federal government created these programs, they created them to help the first responders and the teachers and the students and the residents and the office workers. These are massive programs. And in fact, enrolling helps everybody, because the more that we learn about the health effects of the exposure, the more help can be provided to the people who were affected. So the law was ceremoniously signed on September 11th, 2023, and it goes into effect June 14th, 2024. And that is to give the Department of Economic Development time to draft rules that employers will have to follow to notify people who are eligible for the Victim Compensation Fund and the World Trade Center Health Program.
Which is why our Director of HR, Jamie Alfieri, reached out to Celeste and Ken and said, you have until June, but you need to start thinking about this. And that's why they thought this was a good idea today to present this webinar. So you guys can get a running head start. Again, feel free to use us if you feel that we can give you some assistance to reach your members. We just want people to sign up. Again, they don't have to use us, but protect yourselves and protect your families. Dana, you mentioned the schools earlier, how kids from schools are eligible. What do they do to prove their eligibility? What do the teachers do? What does the staff do?
So school transcripts are very helpful for students, and that's the main way that they establish their eligibility for the programs. For teachers, schools will, for their employees, likely have to follow the 9/11 Notice Act as well and notify the staff and the teachers and faculty of their eligibility. They use employment records. If there aren't employment records, then they will have to get witness presence statements as well. So that's how they do it.
And I know that in many cases, well, first of all, this people, a lot of companies we've been dealing with were wonderful about getting the word out to their employees before Governor Hochul signed the bill, because they knew it was coming down the road. The Department of Education sent out some 20,000 letters, I understand, to former students. I don't know if they did it yet to their staff, but now they will have to all the people who are working at schools south of Houston Street. A lot of the addresses, frankly, are no longer good addresses. But again, all the law will require you as HR people, all you'll have to do is do your best to reach out to these people. And I'm sure when the rules are promulgated, we will share it with you. We have some questions. I see one already from someone who's asking, what about temporary office workers? Well, it depends on the amount of exposure, just like regular office workers who return to their offices. If you were caught in the dust cloud on 9/11, that will enable you to be eligible. If you spend 4 hours in the first 4 days downtown, mostly it's because you were a responder, then you'll qualify. Or if you spend 24 hours at any time in the month of September 2001. And finally, and this is really for the office workers like me and Dana and others here who were here 22 years ago, if you return to work and spend more than 2 full weeks, just like two work weeks, 80 hours or more, you're going to qualify. So speak to a lawyer or call the Victim Fund. Their site has a lot of great information on it.
Michael, for the 9/11 Notice Act, just to that question, one of the important words in the new law is potential eligibility. So you don't have to know for sure that the person is going to be eligible. If you suspect that the person worked there, they were a temporary worker, they may qualify, that is someone who has potential eligibility for these programs, and they'll have to be notified.
Again, I want to thank Celeste and Ken for your kind invitation. Thanks to our own Jamie Alfieri for arranging it. If there's anything we can do for your group in the future, Celeste, including letting you know what these final rules are, we will certainly let the two of you guys know.
We really appreciate that, and we're just so grateful that you took the time to do this webinar. I mean, it's a very timely topic, and we always look to outside sources to help us do our jobs. So I really want to thank all of you for your time today.
It's our pleasure.